A cruel laugh cracked through the cold morning air as a phone camera locked onto Captain Evelyn Clark. "What's with the patch?" "Captain, Halloween came early, Josh." Keller sneered. That's when it fell. A scrap of silver cloth slipped from her bag marked with a symbol no one had seen in years, a skull wrapped in a serpent. "Ghost Viper 9. The crowd hushed. Josh smirked again. "So, we've got a snake in the grass," but another voice cut the silence. Calm, commanding, deadly. General Maddox stepped forward, eyes fixed on Josh. "You just mocked the only one who came back," from Viper Echo. Evelyn didn't flinch, but her hand closed just slightly. What happened out there in the snow, and how much more humiliation can one soldier endure before the truth rips through the silence? Stay with us, because what follows will challenge everything you think you know about strength, sacrifice, and scars. But long before the patch hit the dirt, she had already stood apart. Evelyn Clark didn't arrive like most transfers. No handshake, no commanding officer escort, just an old duffel, a faded service record, and eyes that looked past the world. They said she came from Fort Ironside, but the paperwork was thin, almost too clean. No medals listed, no disciplinary marks either, just a line stamped in red reinstated, by special order. From her first morning at Fort Ridge, she kept to herself, didn't join morning briefings unless ordered, ate alone, trained alone. And when asked about her last unit, she said nothing, just that look again, the one that made even senior NCOs fall quiet. Some say it takes time to earn trust, but with Evelyn, it wasn't about earning trust. It was about surviving something so deep no one dared ask. And the silence around her was only just beginning. But silence unsettles some men, especially the loud ones. Private Josh Keller was one of those. Young, cocky, and the kind of soldier who'd inherited more stripes than he'd earned. Where Evelyn spoke through stillness, Josh preferred an audience. It started with small remarks. "How many pull-ups can a ghost do?" Captain Clark reporting for silent duty as usual. The others chuckled. Not because it was funny, but because laughing was easier than asking questions. She never reacted. Not when he mimicked her gait. Not when he drew fake scars on his arms with marker. Her stillness wasn't defiance. It was something older, deeper, like she had already survived worse than laughter. And the more she said nothing, the more he needed her to break. But what Josh didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the quietest soldiers are often the ones with the loudest shadows behind them. And yet, it wasn't just the silence that made people uneasy. It was what she carried right there in plain sight. Under the rolled sleeves of her standard-issue fatigues, the scars spoke. Not the kind you get from falling off an obstacle course. These were deeper, older, angled like memory. A pale line traced from her elbow to her wrist, too clean to be accidental. Another curled along her collarbone, wide and puckered like a burn that never healed right. And her knuckles, worn, raw. Not from punching walls, but from holding on too long in the places where most people would have let go. Some recruits looked away. Others stared too long as if hoping the marks would explain something. But Evelyn never offered a word. Because for her, the stories that mattered weren't the ones told out loud. They were the ones carved into skin and survived in silence. And Josh wasn't done yet. But the scars were only part of the silence. She didn't sit with anyone in the mess hall. Didn't speak during formation unless directly addressed. Didn't offer opinions. Didn't ask questions. She saluted when required, nodded when necessary, and otherwise vanished into the background. Except, people noticed, because absence has weight too. And Evelyn Clark's silence filled every room she entered like a low-pressure system before a storm. Some thought it was arrogance. Others whispered trauma. But whatever they guessed, none of it came from her. Because Evelyn didn't need to defend herself. She wasn't there to impress, or to explain. Even in drills, her movements were exact. Clean, efficient, but never showy, never loud. Like someone trained not just to survive, but to disappear when the shooting started. And the more they tried to box her in, the more they realized they weren't dealing with a soldier who wanted to fit in, but a shadow that had returned from somewhere none of them had been. And shadows, as Josh was about to learn, don't break, they absorb. But for men like Josh, silence isn't strength. It's a challenge. And the more Evelyn refused to bite, the more he needed her to crack. He didn't want answers, he wanted a show. So one morning during inspection drills, he gave the crowd what he thought they wanted. With a grin and a too casual stumble, Josh let his water bottle fly right into Evelyn's gear laid out beside the barracks wall. The impact knocked over her pack. Contents spilled across the dirt boot's field knife a folded jacket. And then a silver patch fluttered to the ground. The moment it hit, time seemed to thin. A skull wrapped in a serpent. Ghost Viper. 9. Josh picked it up like it was a toy, held it high. "Captain Clark?" He smirked. "Is this your Halloween costume or a secret club?" The laughter was nervous now, not because of what Josh said, but because of how still Evelyn had become. And when veterans go silent, something's coming. It should have been just a patch, but the second it touched the ground, something shifted. One of the older sergeants stopped mid-step. Another lowered his coffee cup without drinking. Even the new recruits laughing just seconds ago fell quiet, because they'd seen that symbol before, not on standard issue gear, not in training manuals, but in whispers, late-night stories during deployment, mission names no one was allowed to say twice. Josh, still riding his moment, tossed the patch back onto Evelyn's pack. "Snakes in the grass, huh?" He grinned, but no one laughed with him now, and Evelyn, she didn't reach for the patch. She didn't pick it up. She just stared at it for a long, long second, then slowly looked up not at Josh but past him. And in that gaze, some of the soldiers felt something they hadn't expected, the early chill of shame and the first edge of fear. Because stories, they don't wear uniforms, but sometimes they come back. But something strange happens when a symbol resurfaces. It wakes the dust in people's memories. That night in the barracks, the whispers started. Ghost Viper 9. "That was shut down years ago, right? I heard they went dark for a week in the mountains. No survivors. That's what the debrief said." Pause. Well, maybe one. The story changed depending on who told it. Some said the unit vanished into snow and silence. Others claimed they were set up left to die after stumbling onto something they weren't meant to see. One thing stayed the same. 8 soldiers went in. Only one ever came out, and nobody ever said her name. Not officially, not even in the after-action reports. Just the code, Ghost Viper. And now she was here, wearing that same haunted stillness, eating alone, training in silence, carrying something the rest of them could barely comprehend. And suddenly, everyone wanted to know what she wasn't saying. And sometimes truth doesn't need to be shouted. It just shows up, quiet, barely visible. A few days later, during a routine weapons check, someone finally saw it. They weren't even looking for it, just standing close enough when Evelyn rolled up her sleeve to adjust her cuff. There it was, etched faintly on the inside of her wrist. A number. 9. Not fancy, not bold, just inked in plain military font, old enough to fade at the edges, precise enough to be deliberate. One of the older corporals squinted, his voice barely above a breath. "That's not a unit number." Another whispered, "No, it's a head count." And suddenly the patch, the silence, the scars, they weren't disconnected pieces anymore. Because soldiers wear ranks. They carry dog tags. But only ghosts wear numbers that no one speaks aloud. And Evelyn Clark had been carrying hers the whole time. And in every unit, there's always someone who's seen enough not to joke. That afternoon, while the younger recruits kept glancing at Evelyn like she was a puzzle missing one piece too many, Staff Sergeant Holloway Gray at the Temples, 30 years in, finally spoke. He didn't raise his voice, didn't call anyone out. He just leaned over to the private beside him and said, "Stop laughing." The kid looked confused. Why, Holloway tapped the edge of his mug. "You ever see someone carry themselves like that without asking for an ounce of respect?" The kid didn't answer, so Holloway did, because they already earned it. Somewhere loud, somewhere bloody. He let the words sit, then added quieter this time, "If she's who I think she is. We owe her more than silence. We owe her space." And from that moment on, the mocking slowed. But the watching began, because old soldiers know. They always know. But the thing about people like Josh Keller, they don't feel the shift in the room until it's too late. The jokes had grown quieter. Eyes had started turning away, but instead of seeing the signs, Josh mistook it for fear, and he liked it. So he planned something bigger, a training challenge he called it, unofficial, off-record, and live-streamed on the squad's private thread. The title, "Let's See What Ghosts Are Made Of." Obstacle course, full gear, no prep, no partner. Let's see if she's got anything left under those scars, he laughed, or if she's just a story in boots. He set up his phone, sent the invite, and prepped the squad to watch, because in Josh's world, silence wasn't sacred, it was weak, and weakness was made to be broken publicly. What he didn't realize was that ghosts don't break, they haunt. The next morning, Evelyn showed up before sunrise. No protest, no hesitation, just her. Full gear, boots laced, eyes steady. Josh grinned. The cameras rolled. Some recruits pulled up chairs expecting a collapse, but collapse never came. She didn't race. She didn't stumble. She moved with deliberate precision like every motion had been carved into muscle long ago. Halfway through the climb, reopened the scar beneath her left elbow. Blood streaked down her arm. She didn't flinch. At the wall crawl a stone, snagged her knee, ripped it raw. Still no sound, and when she crossed the finish line, mud-splattered, bleeding breath calm, she didn't even look at Josh. She just adjusted her cuff and walked past. No speeches, no vindication, no need. Because some victories don't need celebration. They just need witnesses. And that morning, Fort Ridge had plenty. And sometimes silence doesn't push people away. It draws in the ones willing to listen. Later that day, in the shade behind the barracks, a young private approached her. Not cocky, not cruel, just careful. He stood a few feet back, helmet in hand, eyes cast low. "Ma'am," he said, voice cracking just a little, "can I ask something?" Evelyn didn't move, but she didn't turn him away. He continued, "Why'd you come back after whatever that was?" She looked at him for a long time, not harsh, not soft, just honest, then said quietly, "Because I still owe 8 graves a promise. No explanation, no names, just that." The private nodded slowly, backed away, didn't say another word. But when he returned to the others, he didn't retell what she said. He didn't laugh, he just looked at the ground, and sat in silence. Because some answers don't open doors. They close them, quietly. But sometimes a single sentence is enough to crack open the seal on memory. That night, as rain tapped gently on the barracks roof, Evelyn sat alone by her locker, eyes unfocused, breath slow. The overhead lights flickered. And for a moment she wasn't at Fort Ridge anymore. She was back in the white. Wind. Not the kind that hums, but the kind that screams. Static over the comms. The faint sound of boots crunching snow, then gunfire, short, sudden, followed by a voice over the radio, broken and panicked. "We've lost visual. Bravo's gone dark. Do you copy? Ghost Viper?" 9 is silence. Her fingers clenched around the edge of the bench. Not to brace herself, to stay here, now, alive. But it was too late, because when the past comes back, it doesn't knock. It kicks the door in cold bleeding and unfinished. And Ghost Viper 9 was about to speak. And when the memory finally takes hold, it doesn't rewind. It drops you straight in. Eastern Korak Highlands. Elevation 6,700. Wind chill. 15. Evelyn was second in the column. Ghost Viper 9 moved quiet tight like breath before a shot. 8 soldiers. 1 objective recon, an abandoned listening post near the northern ridge. But something was wrong. The radio delay. The echoes that didn't match footstep patterns, and then the cliffside exploded. Not with fire, but with silence. Comms went dead. Flares vanished in whiteout, and one by one, voices dropped off the line. Viper 3, down. Viper 5 is hit. He's not. Then static. Then nothing. Snow swallowed sound. The sky folded in. And Evelyn. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She just drew her sidearm and turned back into the white, because even then she already knew no one was coming. And after the silence came the wait. She found Sergeant Merrick, first leg shredded by shrapnel, eyes barely open. Then Corporal Diaz. Unconscious ribcage cracked inward. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She looped Merrick's arm over her shoulders, strapped Diaz to a field stretcher. Alone. Snow knee-high. Wind tearing sideways like claws. 1 foot, then the next. 5 meters at a time. No GPS, no comms. Just a bearing northwest and a promise she hadn't even spoken yet. The others were gone. But these two, they were still breathing. She didn't pray, didn't curse. She gritted her teeth so hard her molars cracked, and she moved. Hour after hour. Dragging their bodies through the white past burned trees and frozen gear. Every step a gamble. Every breath a countdown. Because survival wasn't about luck anymore. It was math. It was muscle. It was refusal, and Evelyn Clark. She refused to leave them behind. She hit the extraction point by dusk on day 3, knees raw, fingers numb inside torn gloves. Diaz was unconscious, Merrick barely responsive. Evelyn lit the last flare, propped it upright in the snow, then waited and waited. Nothing. She switched to backup channel. Ghost Viper 9 requesting immediate evac. Coordinates 44.928 by 13.1177. We are alive. Repeat, we are alive. Static. Then, unit not recognized. Please verify designation. She stared at the handset like it had slapped her. Again. No answer. Later, she would learn the truth. The mission had been flagged non-recoverable 12 hours earlier. Files sealed. Names archived. Protocol closed. And there she was alive. In a mission the system had already declared dead. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She just turned off the radio and whispered to the snow copy. Because when command forgets you, you don't fight for orders. You fight for names. So she stopped waiting. No more flares, no more calls, just snow, just them, just her. She buried Diaz and Merrick beneath camouflage netting, packed snow around their bodies to slow the bleeding. Then she set the line. Claymore here, tripwire there. A flashbang above the ridge tied with broken antenna wire took her all night. One hand frostbitten, one knee torn. At dawn they came. 3 insurgents, no uniforms, no insignias, but they moved like wolves circling slow rifles ready. Evelyn didn't run, didn't hide. She waited, let them cross the wire, let them feel close, then pulled the first pin, then the second. 1 down, 2 scattered. She crawled, legs shattered from debris breath coming in glass. Still moving, still firing, still shielding the lives behind her. Not for victory, not for medals, for 1 more hour, for 1 more heartbeat, for the 2 she refused to bury next. When the rescue team finally arrived 3 days late, 12 miles off course, they didn't find a soldier standing tall. They found a figure collapsed beside a makeshift shelter, one hand frozen to a flare trigger, the other clutching 3 dog tags in a blood-soaked glove. They lifted her gently, but what Evelyn wouldn't let go was the folded photo inside her boot. 8 faces. Snow behind them. Smiles too wide, gear too clean. Before the mission. Before the cold. Before ghosts. She never said a word on the flight back. Just stared at the horizon. Jaw set, scars still open. Inside her med pack they found 2 letters sealed unsigned written to families she would never meet. She'd carried them miles. Not because she had to, because no one else would. And some burdens aren't assigned. They're chosen. And when Evelyn woke up in the hospital wing, her first question was, "Where are the others?" No one answered. At least, not truthfully. Her report was collected, then edited, then sealed. Ghost Viper 9 was deemed non-operational due to weather failure. The word ambush never appeared. The word survivor barely did. Within a week, the entire unit's designation was dissolved, code cleared, insignia retired, digital traces erased. Evelyn wasn't debriefed. She was reassigned quietly, unofficially, without honors. No medal, no memorial, just a folded transfer order and a typed signature that didn't match any real name. She didn't protest, didn't ask for a tribunal, because some part of her already knew this wasn't a mistake, it was design. And when the truth doesn't serve the narrative, the truth gets buried. Only this time, it didn't stay buried alone. And sometimes the truth only survives, because someone couldn't forget it. It wasn't Evelyn who broke the silence. It was Maddox. The same general who had watched Josh mock her on the field now stepped forward in front of the entire battalion. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I read the after-action report," he said. "Every page, every line. Took me 3 nights, and I still didn't make it to the last paragraph." The room fell still. "You ever wonder why she never says a word?" He looked directly at the squad. "It's not because she's hiding something. It's because she's already survived what broke better men." He turned to Evelyn and nodded, not in command, but in honor, because sometimes silence doesn't mean absence. It means discipline. It means memory. It means I'm still here. And that day, someone finally said her name with respect. And for the first time since she arrived, Evelyn spoke. Not because she was asked to, not because she had to, but because the moment finally allowed it. She stood still, voice low, not fragile. measured. They told me silence was weakness, she said. Told me it meant I had nothing to say. She looked toward the obstacle course, where the dirt still held her blood. But silence kept us alive. Silence kept me moving when screaming would have meant death. Silence carried names that would have been lost in noise. No lecture, no performance, just truth. And, for a beat, no one moved. Because in a world where volume is often mistaken for leadership, she had just reminded them, strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands, bleeding, watching, enduring, quiet. And that kind of strength you don't teach it, you survive it. And after her words faded into silence, all eyes turned to the one who had been loudest. Josh Keller didn't say a thing. Didn't crack a joke, didn't even look up. The weight of it hit differently now. Every smirk, every taunt, every second he thought her silence meant surrender. No one confronted him. No one needed to. Because shame doesn't need a crowd. It grows in the quiet. He left the mess hall early. No one followed. No one spoke. Later that evening he deleted every video, scrubbed the comments, but it didn't matter. The echo had already changed frequency, and for the first time Josh felt something stronger than embarrassment. He felt small. Not because Evelyn humiliated him, but because she didn't need to. She had outlasted the snow. He couldn't even outlast a look. And just like that, the formation began to shift. No command was given, no speech delivered. But the next morning on the field, 2 recruits lined up behind Evelyn during drills. By the end of the week, there were 7. They didn't speak to her, didn't ask for tips. They just watched. The way she checked her gear twice, how she moved through every obstacle like it had muscle memory, the way she listened when others shouted. And slowly, unconsciously, they mirrored her. Tighter laces, straighter backs, fewer complaints. It wasn't obedience, it was instinct. Because when leadership isn't taken but earned, you don't need stripes on your shoulder. You just need people willing to walk in your footsteps. And that's what Evelyn Clark had become, not their commander, but their compass. And if the field was where respect was earned, the lunch hall was where it was proven. For weeks, Evelyn had eaten alone. Same seat, far corner, back to the wall, not out of fear, just habit. 1 tray, 1 cup, always done before the others arrived. But, on a Thursday, Private Lynn took her tray and sat down across from her. No eye contact, no small talk, just a nod. The next day, 2 more followed. By the weekend, her table was full. They didn't talk much, didn't ask questions, but when she stood, they stood. When she cleared her tray, they did too. It wasn't a statement, it wasn't performance, it was presence. Because some leadership doesn't echo through orders, it radiates through rhythm. And in that small act, 1 tray at a time, they built a unit around silence stronger than any team built on noise. And once you've walked beside someone long enough, you start to wonder what path they took to get here. It was after a long march, boots off, socks steaming, everyone exhausted. Private Diaz, the younger one new from West Point, looked over and asked softly, "Ma'am, Ghost Viper, why that name?" Evelyn paused, let the silence settle like snow before it falls. Then answered, because snakes strike from shadow, and ghosts? They carry names no one wants to remember. She didn't smile, didn't look up, just let the words hang. Around her, no one laughed. No one dared. Because now they understood. Ghost Viper wasn't just a unit. It was a memory, a burden, a vow, and she wasn't wearing that patch to be honored. She wore it so the dead wouldn't be forgotten. And in that moment, for the first time, they didn't see a scarred captain. They saw a legend who still walked among them. And once the name had been spoken aloud, the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was earned. Evelyn reached into her chest pocket, pulled out something worn soft at the folds. A paper. Faded. Creased. Stained at the edges. She unfolded it slowly like muscle memory, and laid it flat on the table. 8 names. Written in black ink. No ranks. No titles. Just first names, last initials, and dates. No one asked who they were, they already knew. She tapped one name. Kept watch while I carried Merrick. Another. Taught me to breathe in a blizzard. Another. Died singing a Dolly Parton song to keep us calm. No dramatics, no breakdown, just a finger tracing lives. Each pause a eulogy. And for the next 5 minutes, no one at that table touched their food. Because some stories aren't told with words. They're carried in silence and remembered by those strong enough to bear them. And once the names were spoken, something shifted not in her, but in the ones listening. Because Evelyn Clark wasn't just surviving anymore, she was building something. When the training cycle restarted that season, she requested a new assignment, Field Instructor Direct Action Readiness. Command hesitated, but Maddox signed off without a word, and so every morning she stood at the front of the field not barking orders but demonstrating them. No fanfare, just mud, sweat, and precision. No one slacked, no one joked. Because this wasn't about perfect reps, it was about knowing what it meant to hold the line when no one comes, when the radio goes dead, when your team's heartbeat is the only one left. She wasn't training soldiers to fight. She was training them to remember, to endure, to never leave names behind. And this time the mission would not be forgotten. And long after the drills ended, long after the mud dried on their boots, her name still echoed. Not in chants, not in medals, but in how they moved. One recruit folds their meal tray with both hands. Another rechecks gear without being told. A third carries an extra canteen, just in case someone else goes down. And, above it all, Evelyn watches. Not as a ghost, not as a viper, just as someone who remembers. Voiceover begins. Some legends wear medals. Others wear scars. But the strongest carry silence like steel. They don't need to be heard, only understood. So, if this story stirred something in you, share it. Let someone else hear her name. Let Ghost Viper 9 walk again. Not through shadows, but through the ones who choose to remember. The story is over, but if you remember her name, well, it still goes on.